everybody.
Everyone, I'm Chris. This is the man of the hour, Harried. The new record is called Harried. It's out now via Potions, New York. We're going to spin it in just a couple minutes, but I think first we're going to talk a little bit about the thoughts and the process behind the new collection of songs. So I think I'm going to kind of go with what I'm personally curious about, and I think the first thing had to do with the recording process. So just so everyone knows, like, where did you record this record?
So, some of the songs are residual from the Shape Shop recordings.
So that was the first record.
The first record is 100% of the Shape Shop, and then at that time I was recording a lot at one time, so I ended up with more than one album's worth of material from the Shape Shop specifically. So this record has pieces that are recorded at the Shape Shop, but then it also has pieces that are recorded at my new studio, which is the Center for Search and Research, thanks to my buddy Corey Albritton, who he lets me work at his studio. I'm very lucky for that, because it's given me a place to make a new record, and it's been a real blessing the whole way through, you know.
How would you compare, like, in terms of how setting informs the work that you do in that environment, how would you compare this new one to the Shape Shop?
The biggest difference, I think, would be that the piano that I have at Corey's studio is much more of like a older parlor piano, where the piano at the Shape Shop was a very clean Yamaha upright that had a mute pedal, as well as the ability to mute the strings and sustain them, which is how I get some of the chimey, let's say, like electric piano sounds that I get. Spatially, the Shape Shop had really high ceilings, and it was much more of a bigger room, where Corey's studio is a little more compact, so some of the drum sounds are a little more impactful, I feel, because there's not such a high ceiling space. And then I also, when I started recording these things, I was learning what I was getting back actively, meaning I record these items into the 4-track, and depending on my mic placement, depending on my tape quality, depending on my performance, would be what I'm getting back sonically from the machine. But working in the new studio, I feel like I'm getting better and better and better sounds all the time, if I'm honest, you know.
Well, I know with you and I talked a lot during the first record too,
Yeah.
and I know for the first record you were pretty strict with how you were approaching it. You know, there's like single mic, no punch in, no manipulation in post, like single song in a single evening.
Same thing.
Same
never,
thing.
never gonna change. I don't believe that, for me personally, there's anything beyond that in terms of a discipline. That's created the music that I'm making. Okay? Like, I go into a room, I have a single microphone and a cassette tape and a recorder. Whatever distractions I might have emotionally or personally or in that day or whatever it is, and I just kind of deal with it. I start a piece and I finish it, and I just take as long as that's going to take. It can take minutes, it can take hours, but I don't revisit my pieces personally. I revisit my pieces now in terms of collaboration, where I can listen to things and I think that I can hear the players that I'm lucky enough to play with. I have an ear for their temperament and maybe what we could do together on some of my pieces to help them shine, while other pieces I feel like stand alone, and they're just meant to be 4 tracks. It's just meant to be start to finish, done in one day, you know?
Yeah. And you were talking about the piano at the new spot. Like, so are you coming to the studio with tunes finished, like entirely composed, or are you kind of able to explore things and add as you're going through recording?
There are times that I take themes out of bigger pieces that I've been working on for years and years, and I might let's say, take a bridge from a song or a chorus from a song and incorporate it into a smaller composition, like Tiny Steps on this record, which is dedicated to, I have 2 little nephews. I got new little babies in my life, so they're real cute little babies. That progression is part of a piece that's probably 7 minutes long that I've been working on for about 5 to 10 years, but at the same time, the functional sweet spot of the song is the part that I then created the other piece. Where sometimes it's just how I'm feeling, sometimes it's things that I've been working on or composed pieces of music, and sometimes it's just based on the mood of the day. It really, it's kind of half and half.
Yeah. I mean, on both records, it's really, to my ears, about rhythm, melody. There's like a meeting in between. Like when you're composing pieces, are you beginning with melodic elements? Are you beginning with rhythms? Does it vary from song to song?
It varies from song to song. Some songs I'll start with the piano. Some songs I'll start with something as simple as a shaker and a snap or something like that, just to set out a grid of timing. I don't use a metronome when I record, so say the temperament of the music is kind of affected by the jumping point for sure. You know, like if I can lay down a drum beat and then a percussion part and create a lattice work for the melody, I do that. If I have a melody that I think is rhythmically functional enough to then add drums to, I do that. It kind of it depends on the piece, you know.
Yeah. You were mentioning that piano earlier, and so I think in terms of the instrumentation, this new album expands on what you established as far as palette goes from the first one. We'll get into that more, I think, in a second, but I've actually been wondering, you and I actually haven't talked about this before, I've been wondering how you came to the keyboards kind of in the first place. I know like when you and I met, probably back in 2006 maybe, like, so, you know, at that time, like I knew you as a drummer. Like you were in Chandeliers, you were in Killer Whales, and it wasn't until, I mean, years later that I realized that you were even able to play keys. Like when you kind of transitioned into synths and sequencing with Shandos, and then even with like Songs for God. So I guess I want to just hear more about that. Like, are you formally trained in terms of piano or keyboards?
No, not at all. There's in about 2003, there was an old location where Lynx Hall used to be. Lynx Hall is a dance studio that was on the 2nd floor over by Clark and maybe just north of Roscoe. And the dance studio was closing, and they gave me a piano. So from about 2003, I moved apartments, and I would have my friends help me move this fucking piano. And like, it wasn't really in tune, but I had a piano to kind of tinker with. But I was always 2-finger in it, or 3-finger in it. I was always scared to use all, like, my whole hands. I was like, I don't understand how a piano player can play with 5 fingers, you know? And I mean, I was always a drummer, so I could be like, boom, boom, ba, 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 boom, boom, ba, 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 on the keys or whatever, but most of my piano playing to date is just based on taking the time to just play and kind of figure out what my ear wants to hear. I'm a novice. I mean, I'm not classically trained. I can play a couple classical pieces that I have taught myself, but I like the simplicity of the piano, and I like being able to express myself on a piano, but it's something that just kind of happened. It's not something that I intentionally ever thought was going to happen.
So then how did you arrive? I mean, the piano is so central to like both records, to the kind of sound that you've established. Like, how did you write a piano as opposed to synth, as opposed to?
I only record acoustic music to date, and that's something that I take seriously. I don't record electric instruments. I only have one song that I recorded an electric organ on, out of probably 120 to 150 pieces that I've recorded since like 2019. Like, I like the idea of an acoustic instrument mic'd in a specific way on a cassette tape and the timbre that it gives me back. So, you know, doubling back to your question, like in Chandeliers, when I was playing drums and we were making records, there would be things that I would want to hear, so then I would play my part on the keyboard that I wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became note preference and temperament, and I'd be able to learn more about what I liked about the notes, because we all have different. Everybody in here, we all have different note temperaments, and it's not something that you can necessarily gauge. You know, the sweetest song to somebody is maybe annoying and shrill to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of instrumentation, I mean, the new one expands. It has, you know, certainly horns would be a notable.
It has
like,
a
addition.
nasty amount of brass
got
with
some-
some of the heaviest hitters that I can get my hands on. And that's the point. The point is that I have really nasty players, and they're my friends, and they're nice enough to play on these records with me. So, you know, everybody who's involved on these records, I am supremely proud that they would even consider to work with me in the first place, because it's not, my level of professionalism is not professionalism, it's experience. I'm just somebody who's been in bands for 20 years, and I started going for what I wanted to hear, but I am completely lucky. I mean, Gerald Bailey sitting at the bar over there,
So
like
Gerald.
cold as ice, just like the best player in terms of knowing me and knowing what's gonna happen when we put our sounds together. I think Gerald's instinct has taught me a lot about what my own preferences, because his tone to me is damn near perfect. It's not to be fucked with. Like, he can play. He can listen to me and know what's gonna make it better. It's kind of like, I feel like with this record, I'm spending all day making stock, you know? And then I hand it off to these pros where I collaborate, and, you know, I had Keith in the studio. I recorded Keith for this record. Both of
Keith
his
Jackson.
pieces. Keith Jackson, another creative, just monster of a player. But I give these guys a raw stock, a lattice work, and they come back with a complex soup, you know, that's more beautiful than the sum of its parts. And it's something where I don't do this for ego. I don't do this for happiness. I do it because I really care about music, and I feel like the music that I'm lucky enough to be putting out there is including some really brilliant minds. I mean, Bill McKay, beautiful guitar player. I'm lucky as hell to know him. I feel lucky enough to know him, let alone have him on my record. Hope and Bill and I did Heartstrings together, and it's like one of the greatest accomplishments I feel like I've ever had, you know?
And yeah, so that's Hope Arthur.
It's Hope
And
Arthur.
then, did Dave play this record too?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Dave-
do we miss anyone?
No, Dave would be the last one, the Diminisher, and he plays on the song The Diminisher. And,
He's recording right now back in Columbia. So.
Yeah, hopefully he's gonna show up right around the block.
So, and so I'm guessing from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like, in terms of these collaborators, it sounds like their contributions were sort of mapped out beforehand. You're kind of leaving it up to them to give you whatever came to them.
The only thing that I've ever told a player is to make it hurt. I want it to hurt. Just get into it, you know? Gritty as possible. Make it hurt. Like, we're making music that hopefully has a beauty to it and a charm to it, as well as an edge to it, and a comment on where we are, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned Heartstrings, which I think is kind of the third and final big departure insofar as, you know, it's it's not a departure insofar as that it's personal, but it is a departure in that it's a cover song, and there's different instrumentation as far as the use of accordion and acoustic guitar. You're also singing.
Yeah, you can call it that.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that song a little bit?
Heartstrings was written by Dan Jugel and John Williams in, I would default to Mike Browers, I would say probably 1999 to 2001, something like that. And they recorded a bedroom demo. Johnny later was the guitar player in my band, The Killer Whales, and The Killer Whales used to play Heartstrings, and it would just slay. When I first heard it, I moved to Chicago and I lived in an apartment in Lakeview, and my next door neighbor was Eric Browers, and he and I became really close, and he introduced me to Mike, and I ended up over at Mike's house in Logan Square, and that's where I met Dan Jugel, that's where I met Ken Zawacki, that's where I first saw Johnny when he was about to perform Johnny in the Heat, and was drinking fucking jug wine like a hobo. But Heartstrings is different. Heartstrings is not my song, okay? I don't take any possession of this song. The only reason I wanted to put out this song is because I know for a fact that it's a hit. Okay? It's a hit. It's Dan's hit, it's Johnny's hit, but it's a killer of a song. I mean, I hope you like my version. I didn't, their version was electric guitar and drum machine and synths. My version is accordion, acoustic guitar, drums, and voice, and it's recorded acoustically. I'm really proud of how I recorded it. I bought a $6 headphone splitter. So Bill and Hope came over, sat in the same room, I mic'd them at the same time, and then we just went out of the machine to the headphone splitter. They each got their signal. I recorded their two parts at the same time over my drum part that I did over the demo. So the timing and the structure of the song is exactly that of the demo. I didn't stray from what Dan and John did at all in terms of the structure and of what the song is. But I think it's a really nice nod to the scene of musicians that I come from in my life. And I'm really happy that I can look around this room and see people who've known me since I got here, I came here from New Jersey obsessed with Jeff Parker's guitar sound and post-rock and didn't know anything about making records. I didn't know anything about what I liked in terms of production. I never thought about making records until I was, probably here for 5 years, so. I believe in Heartstrings very, very sincerely, and I hope everybody loves it,
So the record came out this week, but you've been living with these songs for a year and a half, maybe longer?
Yeah.
So, has the way that you see them, or like the way that you relate to them either as a composer or as a listener, has that changed over time?
I think the thing that's changed, I think the benefit of being able to reflect on both the timing in which you recorded music as a placekeeper for your personal history is important. The first song on the record is a synth ballad, and it was recorded in New Jersey, and it's the first song that I recorded after my dad died, and it's a complete, let's say, departure from the sound, but it's not a complete departure from me. It's me. It's the first thing I recorded after my dad died. It's the sound that whatever that is, it was very intentional to prove things to myself with this record, that I'm not a one-trick pony, that I can do more than just drums and piano, in a somewhat morose state. the benefit of being able to look back on these songs is I think contextually I can kind of frame them more in an artistic way instead of this cerebral feeling of, like when I first heard Gerald's parts on Royal Robes a Row, when the first time it hit me, and it affected me so drastically because it was something that I've done. Now I can almost look at it in a frame on a wall, and it's not that it's any less beautiful, it's not that it's any less exciting, it's just, it's contextually different because he and I have already moved on to a different realm, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking before this, you were saying, yeah, record 3 is already good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you, I mean, clearly your song is recording all the time. How do you is it kind of a similar thing with that third batch of songs that you just find ways to relate to things, even despite being far away from them in terms of your creation or like putting them down?
I think the thing that I gain from my process is the closure of completing a piece in a day. So then I don't have to. Everybody who's a musician in this room understands that when you record a record, you have infinite possibilities in front of you. And if you're recording with an engineer and technology, your possibilities exponentially increase, which gives you the ability to do a lot more things. The limitations that I put on myself make it so that when I walk out of the studio, you know, because it's not as easy as just going in the studio, recording a piece, and then it's on a record. It's not like that, you know? There's failures and there's successes. I'm learning all the time. I'm learning. Songs come off the rails. I'm not using a metronome. I might be drinking too much fucking coffee or something.
Yeah.
Something might happen to take one of my pieces and destroy it, and I just have to accept that and move on and be like, that piece was real nice, but you need to do it over again because you destroyed it. You know what I mean? It's like, it gives me sort of a feeling of freedom from myself because I've done all I could at that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to reflect on my music and be like, oh, I could have did this or I could have did that, because it's not. What does that do for you?
Yeah, but
Do it the next time.
right. Nice. Yeah, no, that's what I had planned. So
Yeah.
thanks everyone for listening and
Thank
for
you
being
so
here.
much for being here, everybody. It's so good to see everybody in this room. I love you guys so much. And I want honest opinions, alright? If there's any duds on this record, you'd be like, what are you doing on this song?
It's a nice record. You fucked it up though. Do it again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.